You can have.
Main event of the evening.
Motorcycle humps, ready to race to you.
These days are Happy days. These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 8, Episode 20, Howard's Bowling Buddy, or Howard's Girlfriend.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Howard's Bowling Buddy or Howard's Girlfriend.
We open at Arnold's, where Al is agitated because the health inspector found Clarence floating in the soup. Chachi remarks to Joni that today is the 4th anniversary of the first time he asked her out, and she responded by laughing at him. Joni remembers how short Chachi used to be, and Chachi threatens to break up with her.
Keep that up, and next year will be the first anniversary of when we broke up.
Well, I'm not laughing now.
Jenny arrives and takes Joni aside to tell her she got a notice from the post office regarding a package she sent away for, meant to increase her bus size. She used Joni's name to order it, and now she needs Joni's help to pick it up. As they leave, Howard and Marion enter in their bowling shirts to collect Al.
Well, have fun. We'll catch you later. Oh, take a good look. The next time you see me, there may be a lot more.
Later at the Cunningham house, Joni and Jenny are in the kitchen with the unopened package as Howard and Marion come home, high off their team winning. Marion shows the girls a trick with the bowling ball that Howard showed her and promptly throws her back out.
Howard, I can't straighten up. My back went out.
Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?
The next day, Roger and Potsy are hanging Marion from the kitchen door, which will supposedly help realign her vertebrae.
Now, Aunt Marion, this should stretch and relieve the pressure of your upper vertebrae and your pelvic girdle.
Roger, not in front of Potsy.
The hanger is Potsy's. His father used to hang him from it, and he didn't even have a bad back. They leave, and Fonzie joins Marion, who laments that now Howard doesn't have a chance of winning a bowling trophy he had his heart set on. The man himself shows up, and reveals Marion has nothing to worry about. He's replaced Marion with a woman he met who works as an assistant loan officer at the bank, named Fern Flagg, who he describes as an old spinster woman. Fonzie knows her, and he takes Howard aside. Feel-good Fern is no old spinster.
Old spinster lady, this chick is a knockout.
But Howard sees no reason to upset Marion. Fonzie says nothing good ever comes from a lie, but Howard insists he knows what he's doing.
Trust me, I know what I'm doing.
And then Fern herself shows up to see if Howard needs a lift to the bowling alley. Howard leaves with her, and Marion realizes that Howard lied to her, and he's been going to that bank for years. How deep do the lies go? That night in the kitchen, Joni and Jenny open the package to find that it's just tissue paper to stuff into a bra.
Oh, it must be packed in tissue. Wrong. It's not packed in tissue. It is tissue, Jenny. Just a minute, smart guy. There are instructions. All right. Roll tissue into balls, then stuff into undergarment, then watch out for all the guys.
Jenny got scammed out of $12.99 in 1960s money, but she's not too broken up about it. She'll just resell it to her sister. Howard and Fern return from the bowling alley, with Fern laughing uproariously at Howard's hardware jokes.
So this guy comes into the hardware store and he says, "Hey, have you got any nails?" And I said, "Sure."
They won mixed doubles, but at Fern's suggestion, Howard decides to not tell Marion until tomorrow, since she needs her rest. Fern remarks on Howard's physique, and he reveals he was a shot putter in college. She gushes over his strength, and he lies about his exercise regimen.
I get up every morning at 7 o'clock and I jog 5 miles. And then I do 50 push-ups.
Push-ups?
Mhm.
No kidding.
Yeah, look, I'll show you.
Then invites her to tomorrow's awards banquet at the Pfister Hotel, since Marion can't come. She accepts, and then Howard escorts her to her car. Marion hobbles down the stairs as Fonzie enters, and she reveals she heard Howard and Fern's entire conversation.
He used all the same stuff on her that he used to impress me with 27 years ago.
The next night, the awards show is drawn to a close, and Howard and Fern are the last two people there. Since they only got the one trophy, Howard suggests he and Fern have it on alternate weeks. This is the first trophy he's ever won, and he admits to Fern that he exaggerated the other night. He never did shot put, and he doesn't really do push-ups either. Fern says that Howard is still man enough for her, and she wants them to be more than just friends. Howard realizes he is in way over his head. He turns down her advances, explaining that he's a married man. His family means everything to him, and he would like to keep the promise he made to Marion years ago. As Marion sneaks into the room, Fern says she was just looking to have a good time with Howard, that's all. Also, she insults his DeSoto.
People do have a good time, you know, Howard. Not everybody drives a DeSoto.
Howard gets up to go call Marion, and the woman herself joins Fern at the table. She admits to having been consumed with jealousy, and begs Fern to tell her if she had designs on Howard. Fern says yes, and Marion calls her a tramp, tart, and bimbo, even after Fern says Howard turned her down flat. An embarrassed Fern leaves. Howard joins Marion, and assures her that it wasn't much fun without her. He tells a tearful Marion he loves her, and as they leave, Marion tells him that tomorrow, they're changing banks.
Thank you, Peter. That was Howard's Bowling Buddy. It first aired back on May 12, 1981. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which Laverne breaks her leg and dreams about what the world would be like if she had never been born.
I wish I was never born. I wish I was never born.
That can be arranged.
NBC aired a special called Dean Martin's Comedy Classics, hosted by Dean himself with Orson Welles.
In the history of television, the Dean Martin Show is really one of a kind.
This was a collection of sketches from Dean's 1960s variety show featuring such stars as Frank Sinatra, Bob Newhart, Dom DeLuise, and Goldie Hawn. And CBS had an episode of its educational series, The Body Human, called The Bionic Breakthrough.
Tuesday, new and astounding scientific discoveries of the future on the award-winning series, The Body Human, The Bionic Breakthrough.
This was about medical technology of the next century, including the use of lasers and bionic body parts. Alexander Scourby served as the narrator. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I'm going to be honest, The Body Human sounds really cool, so I'm going to watch that.
I am tempted by The Bionic Breakthrough, but I've got to watch that Dean Martin's Comedy Classic special because it's a remnant of what I call real show business. Back when comedians wore tuxedos just to tell jokes. That kind of show business was dying off rapidly.
I blame Andrew Dice Clay.
Howard's Bowling Buddy was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Bob Howard. The most recent of Bob's episodes that we covered was Fonzie Gets Shot. As for guest stars this week, we only have one, Patricia Carr Bosley as Fern Flagg.
Well, I was just on my way to the bowling alley, and I thought I'd stop by and see if you needed a lift.
Oh, well, thanks.
Also known as Patty Carr, she's an actress from Los Angeles who became Tom Bosley's second wife.
Meet your second wife.
In December 1980, and stayed married to him until his death in October 2010. Patty had a handful of acting credits in the 1980s, including the movies American Gigolo and A Stranger is Watching, plus the TV shows The Edge of Night and The Love Boat. Tom's first wife, Jean, died during the fifth season of Happy Days in 1978. So, Peter, what did you think of Patricia Carr Bosley as Fern Flagg?
Her performance was excellent, and she and Tom Bosley do have a really good chemistry together that makes sense when you find out that they were very happily married at the time and for a very long time. Knowing that they were married made this episode kind of funny in a way, because throughout this episode, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the fact that Fern is a very attractive woman. I was very tickled by the fact that they cast his real-life wife in a role where the main requirement is be really pretty. I will also say that knowing that they were married in real life does kind of make the ending where she gets slut-shamed a little bit uncomfortable, but I assume she was okay with that if they stayed married.
I'm positive she was fine with this because Patricia Carr Bosley has so much fun with the role of Fern Flagg, being the Jolene of this episode.
I'm begging of you, please don't take my man.
Well, she doesn't want to break up their marriage exactly, but she does want to have some fun, she says, with Howard. I thought that was really amusing that she is so upfront about her desire.
Yeah, no bones about it. She just wants to take a ride on the Howard train.
It's the Soul Train. Beep, beep. Get on board.
The most wholesome way you can have an episode about Howard possibly cheating on his wife is to have his real-life wife playing the temptress. So I thought that was a good solution on Happy Days' part. As for songs this week, we hear When I Fall in Love.
When I fall in love.
A pop song written in 1952 for the movie 1 Minute to Zero. The first version of the song was performed by Jerry Southern, but it has since become a standard recorded by many singers, including Nat King Cole, Celine Dion, and Doris Day. The version we're hearing on Happy Days is based on a top 10 hit by The Lettermen from 1962.
When I fall in love, it will be forever.
We also hear Surf City by Jan and Dean from 1963. We've heard that many times this season. As for cultural and historical references this week, Chachi says he has a song in his heart. With A Song in My Heart is a show tune by Rodgers and Hart from 1929. It's from the stage and screen musical Spring is Here.
Spring is here, spring is here.
Passionate Confessions is not the name of any real tabloid or magazine from the 1960s.
Jones, come on! That ad we read in Passionate Confessions about a month ago?
But publications from this era were infamous for wildly misleading ads for dubious products, including bust enhancers. The most famous of these was the Mark Eden bus developer, marketed by a couple of California salon owners, Jack and Eileen Feather. The U.S. Postal Service hated the Feathers and continually tried to shut them down for mail fraud, but they lasted until the 1980s, marketing such items as trim jeans, vacuum pants, and the Astro jogger alongside the bus developer. Eventually, the law caught up with them, and the Feathers had to pay $1 million fine and remove their products from the market.
I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won.
Peter, were you familiar with these scam ads from publications in the past?
I am familiar with stuff from comic book ads, like your X-ray specs, your sea monkeys, and I vaguely remember hearing about bust enhancers, but not specifically from tabloids. But it does make sense that would be where they would advertise.
Comic books and tabloids were the main place where these products were sold. And you might think that a scam like the one we see in this episode is way beyond what a real company would ever do. But I don't think so, because I remember a story about one kid who ordered what he was promised was a log cabin from a comic book. And what he got was a plastic sheet that you were supposed to drape over a table.
Oh my God.
And pretend that that was a log cabin. It had like a log cabin design printed on it.
Wow, buyer beware.
Jenny says that milk builds bodies 8 ways. This is a reference to a 1960s ad campaign for Wonder Bread. The company's slogan back then was, helps build strong bodies 12 ways.
Wonder helps build strong bodies 12 ways.
What did she say? I wish it helped build bodies 9 ways.
Yeah.
I thought she should have said 9 and 10 to make the joke work, but okay. Howard says that Marion bowled 2 games over 150 and is carrying a 119 average. A perfect score in bowling is 300. Beginners tend to score between 50 and 70, and average players score 140 to 170. Howard also says they were 14 pins down in the 8th frame. A game of bowling consists of 10 frames with 30 points possible per frame. Peter, how familiar are you with the rules of bowling?
Only somewhat. Basically everything that Howard said in this episode about bowling itself was kind of gibberish to me.
It was to me too, which is why I had to go online and look all this stuff up. I've only been bowling on a couple of occasions. It never goes well.
Oh no.
Now, Marion spends much of this episode in traction. Does hanging in traction actually help back problems? Yes, it may stretch out the spine and decrease pressure on the discs and nerve roots. It may also increase the space between the vertebrae.
He likes to hang from a chin-up bar to straighten out his back. That's all you got to know.
Sessions should last 30 to 45 minutes, and you may have to do it 20 to 28 times over a period of weeks. Some real-life devices look very similar to what we see in this episode. Have you ever seen anybody use devices like this?
Not hanging that way, no.
Well, not hanging from a kitchen door, no, but it's actually somewhat plausible.
Yeah, good for you, Happy Days.
Maybe somebody on the staff actually had problems like this. Marion says she feels like Howdy Doody. We are already very familiar with Howdy.
Oh, well, howdy, Doody kids, and howdy, Buffalo Bob. Well, howdy, Mr. Doody.
A cowboy puppet who had his own TV show on NBC from 1947 to 1960. Unlike the Muppets, Howdy Doody dangled from strings that were operated from above the stage. If Jenny spent $12.99 on the bust enhancer, that's over $126 in today's money.
Holy schlamola! What are you going to do with all that kablingy?
We've talked about the Pfister Hotel many times on this podcast. It's a real-life Milwaukee landmark that is often mentioned on Happy Days. Can you remember any other episodes that actually took place at the Pfister?
There was a scene in the one where Richie fell in love with the older woman. Richie Falls in Love, yeah, that was the episode.
Yes, he goes to the bar at the Pfister. So we have been in the Pfister, but we haven't seen the ballroom, I guess, at the Pfister Hotel. We've also referenced the DeSoto many times. As a reminder, the DeSoto was a car manufactured by Chrysler from 1928 to 1961. So by the time of this episode, which takes place circa 1963, the DeSoto is already a thing of the past. They had a reputation for being clunky, uncool family cars, but there are some DeSotos that actually looked pretty cool. They weren't all like the one Howard drives. Other observations this week. So is it canon that Jenny and Chachi do not get along? They seem antagonistic in this episode.
Jenny, always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise. Sit down. Okay.
Peter, your thoughts?
Sometimes they don't get along. Sometimes Jenny is kind of flirtatious with him, and she implies to Joni that she'd like to date him herself. So it's not super consistent.
My favorite line in this episode is Marion saying, "Jenny, dear, please go home, please." I like that she still calls Jenny dear, and that she says please twice.
Jenny, dear.
Yeah?
Please go home, please.
Marion is a very polite lady, but also she really wants Jenny to just go home.
I like that Marion tries to stay nice even when she's in pain. And this week, Peter, they double, triple, and quadruple down on the jokes about the torture that Potsy received from his father.
Potsy, that's pathetic.
Oh, no, it's better than being rolled up in the rug.
I know in the past that you've expressed discomfort with these types of jokes on the show. What did you think of Potsy's story in this episode?
The way that Potsy just casually mentions, yeah, sometimes my father would hang me from the door or roll me up in a rug, kind of makes me wonder if he was exaggerating this time, because Roger shows no real response to it. He's just like, huh, yeah, that's a thing your dad does, apparently.
I don't know that Potsy is imaginative enough to dream up all of these things, like being rolled down the hill in a giant tire. I think some of that might have actually happened to poor Potsy, which is why he's going into psychology as a profession.
He wants to understand why his father is like this and what it means for him in the future.
Maybe he's trying to break out of this pattern of abuse, which is good for Potsy. The first time that I watched this episode, I did not notice that Howard held out his hands during the joke about selling nails, and I thought the entire punchline was just him saying, sure. And I thought, wow, what an avant-garde, Andy Kaufman-esque anti-comedy joke. But no, it's a pun on nails and nails. In this episode, Howard lies about his age. He de-ages himself, but I think he says his real age is 46.
At age 41, you lose a little bit.
So if Howard is 46 and he's been married for 27 years, does that mean he got married at 19? That can't possibly be right. I think that Happy Days has long since forgotten how old any of these characters are or how long Howard and Marion have been married, and so they just make it up as they go along. What do you think, Peter?
That makes about as much sense as anything else, yeah.
It is interesting to me that Marion is injured in this episode and spends most of it in a bathrobe. In the Simpsons episode, The Last Temptation of Homer, which is thematically similar to Howard's bowling buddy, Marge is ill with a bad cold and spends much of the episode in a bathrobe. In both episodes where the father and husband is tempted to cheat with another woman, the wife and mother is ill and therefore less desirable. So I thought that was an interesting connection between those episodes. They're still trying to make Jiminy Crickets into Howard's catchphrase. I wish Happy Days all the luck in the world with that. How would you rate Jiminy Crickets as a Happy Days catchphrase?
It's no sit on it, or amundo as a suffix.
I would say it's on a par with Wiki Wacky Woo, which they also tried to make into a catchphrase.
Yep.
And one of the surprises in this episode is seeing the more vindictive or aggressive side of Marion's personality. She uses some words that she might not otherwise use, including tart, tramp, and bimbo.
Were you after Howard?
Yes.
You tramp.
What did you think of seeing the darker side of Marion's personality in this episode?
I think it makes sense. She spent the entire day worried that her husband was maybe cheating on her, and then the possible cheatee admitted, yeah, I really wanted to bang your husband. Arguably, it's warranted in this case, but the fact that Fern just leaves kind of makes it feel a little bit cruel.
I think that Fern will recover in time, and I think part of the reason why this episode was made was to do a scene where Marion just loses it, because she spends so much of this entire series being nice and thoughtful and considerate and polite.
Oh, yeah. And this is the episode where she goes just a little bit apeshit.
Exactly. They were trying to think, what's a situation that would really break Marion? And this would do it. So I thought that was interesting. Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
I love the bowling shirts that Howard and Marion and Fern wore. They're bright yellow and they have checkerboards on the shoulders. To bring it back to The Simpsons again, they kind of look like the shirts that John Waters wore in that one episode, but not green.
I have a little action figure of Jeff Bridges as the dude from The Big Lebowski.
His dudeness or duder or, El Duderino, if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
And he's wearing a yellow bowling shirt that looks very much like the ones in this episode. So I was reminded of Jeff.
Oh, wow. I wonder if they were specifically referencing this episode of Happy Days.
I hope that they were. And I also noticed that the female bowlers tend to wear a brown skirt with the yellow bowling shirt, and Marion wears a long skirt. Of course, Fern Flagg wears a very short skirt.
Oh, yeah. It's a subtle little piece of character building.
It is. They're using the outfits to reveal character. Peter, did you have any other observations that you wanted to make about Howard's bowling buddy?
I was just really happy to have another DeSoto joke. It feels like we haven't had one of those for a long time.
Happy Days is getting back to its roots and remembering what made the show great. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
I'm not wild about episodes about Marion being insecure about her marriage to Howard, but this was a pretty solid one, I think. If only for the novelty of having Tom Bosley's real-life wife play his attempted homewrecker. And I did really like the subplot of Jenny and Joni trying to get this dubious product and getting scammed. I love that Jenny's response was just, okay, I'll just resell it to my sister and make the money back. She's a very enterprising young woman, and I love that for her.
The Jenny and Joni stuff is what I would call a textbook example of a sitcom B-plot done correctly. It's just a funny little self-contained episode that does not have any great ramifications on the characters' lives and doesn't affect the A-plot at all, but it just fills up some time in the episode and generates some laughs. I pretty much liked Howard's Bowling Buddy. Again, like you, I enjoyed seeing Tom Bosley interact with his real-life wife, and I like seeing another side of Marion's personality. We've never talked about this on the air, but I would say that Marion is actually my favorite character in all of Happy Days. So I like episodes that focus on Howard and Marion. Every once in a while, you have to have an episode that tests Marion's niceness and her kindness and pushes her to the limit to see what the limit is. And that's what Howard's Bowling Buddy does. I love that they brought it around to a joke at the very end where, as they're leaving the Pfister Hotel, she just casually tells Howard that they're changing banks. I thought that was a pretty funny ending.
Yeah, Marion Ross delivers that line so well.
I trusted you with that woman.
Well, thank you, dear.
Tomorrow we're going to change banks.
Yes, dear.
This is a great showcase for her. So for all those reasons, I actually quite enjoyed Howard's Bowling Buddy. Again, it's not always fun to see Marion insecure or Marion suffering, but I would say that this episode was more fun than the time that Marion went to jail.
Yeah.
That maybe went a little too dark for me, so this was just about right. I would definitely recommend that people check out Howard's Bowling Buddy, if for no other reason than they're curious to see Tom Bosley's real-life wife. Most of the people in the cast have had wives, girlfriends, parents, sons, daughters, etc. on the show. Only Henry. I don't think Henry had anybody so far on the show. That's weird. Well, he's got a couple more seasons to go, so we'll see if somebody from Henry Winkler's inner circle ever gets to be on the show. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysareurs.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysareuspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Fonzie meets a woman who he thinks might be his long-lost mother in Mother and Child Reunion.
This sounds like it could be a very interesting and revealing episode of Happy Days. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?